Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhamsapad Viraja Pitarāv Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhamsapad Viraja Srila Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki. Prem Sukho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Vedikadara Sivasti Sri Vedikadara Sivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki. Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakund Radhakunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki, Mathura Dham ki, Navadvip Dham ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki, Ganga Mai ki, Yamuna Mai ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Bhakti Devi ki jai. Sankirtan Yagya ki jai, Vriyat Madanga ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Sri Sri Damodar Month ki jai. Sri Sri Govardhan Puja ki jai. All gloriously assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All gloriously assembled devotees. All gloriously assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudhevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudhevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudhevāya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nastra Preshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. And the verse today is in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.1, chapter 12, verse 22. And the mṛgendraḥ iva vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv mṛgendraḥ iva vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv iva mṛgendraḥ iva vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv iva. Mṛgendraḥ vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv iva. Mṛgendraḥ vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarau iva. Mṛgendraḥ vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau titikṣur pitarāv iva. Mṛgendraḥ vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv iva. Hare Krishna. Mṛgendraḥ vikrānto niṣevyo himavān iva titikṣur vasudhevāsau sahiṣṇuḥ pitarāv iva. Mṛgendraḥ. Repetition there. Word for word. If you can just go for word. Mṛgendraḥ, the lion. Iva, like. Vikrāntaḥ, powerful. Niṣevyaḥ, worthy of taking shelter. Himavān, the Himālaya Mountains. Iva, like. Titikṣur, forbearance. Vasudhā iva, like the earth. Asau, the child. Sahiṣṇuḥ, tolerant. Pitarau, parents. Iva, like. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. This child will be as strong as a lion. Will I read it through once and then you repeat? That's not okay. And as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth, and as tolerant as his parents. The child, translation, with repetition please. This child will be as strong as a lion. This child will be as strong as a lion. And as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth. And as tolerant as his parents. Once all through, translation. This child will be as strong as a lion and as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as his parents. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. You had a wonderful purport yesterday that was actually 4 pages long. So this one is much shorter. I did actually get a text message saying that my class today was yesterday's class. And I looked and said, 4 pages of purport. And but this one's only got a very short purport. So, but every line in the Srimad Bhagavatam is enough to liberate anyone. So the size doesn't matter. Purport. One is compared to the lion when one is very strong in chasing an enemy. One should be a lamb at home and a lion in the chase. The lion never fails in the chase of an animal. Similarly, the head of the state should never fail in chasing an enemy. The Himālaya Mountains are famous. The Himālaya Mountains are famous for all richness. There are innumerable caves to live in, numberless trees of good fruits to eat, good springs to drink water from, and profuse drugs and minerals to cure diseases. Any man who is not materially prosperous can take shelter of these great mountains, and he will be provided with everything required. Both the materialist and the spiritualist can take advantage of the great shelter of the Himālayas. On the surface of this earth, there are so many disturbances caused by the inhabitants. In the modern age, the people have begun to detonate atomic weapons on the surface of the earth. And still the earth is forbearing to its inhabitants, like a mother who excuses a little child. Parents are always tolerant to children for all sorts of mischievous acts. An ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities, and the child Parikshit is foretold to have all these qualities in perfection. Translation again. This child will be as strong as a lion, and as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth, and as tolerant as his parents. So this wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada begins Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Jaya Pataka Swaminiti Namane. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, we got the very good translation, which was, the child will be as strong as a lion, as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains, as forbearing as the earth, and as tolerant as his parents. So when it says the child will be as strong as a lion, one doesn't usually think of a lion as protecting the weak. One thinks of a lion as being a ferocious animal. So as strong as a lion, we all feel fear. At least I do. But when Srila Prabhupada explains what that means in the context of the verse, he says a lion is always strong in chasing an enemy. Because we think of a lion as always strong as chasing its prey when it's hungry. But here Srila Prabhupada explains it in a much better way than our imagination would. He's always strong in chasing an enemy. And the lion never fails in the chase of an animal. And similarly, the head of state should never fail in chasing an enemy. And it's not his personal enemy. These are enemies of the state. He says, Prabhupada doesn't say the king should never fail in chasing an enemy. Because then you think, an enemy could be me. I'm a member of the state and I say something about the king. Therefore, the king's going to chase me. Srila Prabhupada's choice of words is fantastic. He says the enemy of the state. He doesn't say the king's enemy. He says the enemy of the state. Srila Prabhupada just covers every angle here. How wonderful that is. So the lion should never fail in the chase of an animal. It says, and a lion, when one is strong in chasing an enemy, one is compared to a lion. But then he says, so we can understand, Parikshit is chasing an enemy, he will be as strong as a lion. But Prabhupada qualifies that. He says, the head of the state should never fail in chasing an enemy. Enemies of the state. So when he's king, he should never fail in chasing the enemies of the state, and that's why in the translation in the verse it says, mṛgendra vikrānto, this child will be as strong as a lion. Not just as strong as a lion. He is the king. He will be able to defend the state against all enemies. Can anyone think of one great enemy that Maharaj Parikshit had to confront, that we all know about, mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you know, Kali. The greatest enemy, in fact, the enemy of the whole age. How could Maharaj Parikshit stand up to someone like Kali, who Maharaj Parikshit, he only lived so many years, and then he gave up his body almost voluntarily, at a young age, at his height of his prowess. So I would guess he would be about maximum 45 years old. Kali was alive then, he's still alive now. A hugely powerful person, now dominating the whole world. And Maharaj Parikshit stood up to him, just like a lion confronts the prey, without any fear. It's a very important thing to note. This was Maharaj Parikshit. He didn't get defeated by Kali. He'll be as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. Well, Himālaya Mountains, you don't usually think of the Himālaya Mountains as a shelter. When you think of the Himālaya Mountains, you think of freezing to death. That's what most people think of the Himālaya Mountains. But here Srila Prabhupada explains why the Himālaya Mountains are worthy. He says, as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. And these two comments are sort of opposite. It says, will be as strong as a lion and as worthy a shelter as the Himalaya Mountains. Because for Maharaj Parikshit to be as strong as a lion, it refers to him. But when you say he's as worthy a shelter as the Himalaya Mountains, it's referring to everyone else. So it's not, these are qualities which are almost opposite. One, he'll be as powerful as a lion in chastising the enemy, which is something his prowess can dominate the whole world. And then he says, he'll be as worthy a shelter as the Himalaya Mountains, which means that although he's immensely powerful, anyone can take shelter of him. And why are the Himalaya Mountains worth a shelter? Because it says here they're famous for all riches. They're not so famous now for all richness, but they are famous for all richness throughout the Vedic scriptures. There are innumerable caves to live in, numberless trees of good fruits to eat, good springs to drink water from, and profuse drugs and minerals to cure diseases. I mean, that's almost like, you could say nowadays we think of Hawaii in those terms. It's a place where if you don't have enough to eat, if you go to Hawaii, it's like a tropical paradise. You can get fruits from the trees, coconuts grow there. They don't have great ownership rules there. They've got forests. The climate is wonderful. You don't need to suffer too much. So in those terms, the Himalaya Mountains are sort of like some sort of paradise. Any man who is not materially prosperous can take shelter of these great mountains, and he will be provided with everything required. Both the materialist and the spiritualist can take advantage of the great shelter of the Himalayas. So we can understand that Maharaj Parikshit is as worthy of shelter for all your material and spiritual needs. Anyone who's in need of material support or spiritual support can go and take shelter of the Himalaya Mountains. And they can take shelter. Maharaj Parikshit will provide such shelter to all who take such a shelter, to everyone who seeks shelter from him. He can provide that. That is his incredible power. And very interestingly, all this was said before he was born, or at the time of his birth. This is done by astrological purposes, and there are actually 13 verses taken up just predicting what Maharaj Parikshit's prowess would be. Prabhupada goes on to say, here it says, he will be forbearing like the earth. So we don't, generally nowadays people don't think of the earth as being forbearing. We think of the earth as being a resource that we can use. The earth is a resource. It supplies coal. The earth supplies, you can say it supplies precious metals. In those days, precious metals would mean jewelry and diamonds and gold and things like that. Nowadays, precious metals are lithium and other metals that we need to create smartphones computers, uranium for our weaponry and things like that. So we think of the earth not as being particularly forbearing, but more like a provider. The earth is like humanity's provider of everything we need. So the earth is like a provider. Although we say Mother Earth, our mother also provides us everything we need when we're children. It provides milk and that. So we don't normally. So it's a provider. It's just there, and we take. But here he's considered to be forbearing like the earth. This is interesting. Why is he saying forbearing like the earth? We've just heard that he's as worthy as shelter of the Himālaya Mountains, the provider of wealth, the provider of shelter in the form of caves, and the king can provide shelter to his citizens in the form of housing and comforts. So we've got a provider. So why would forbearing be a quality that's necessary? We've got him. He's a lion. He's able to protect the whole state. He's like the Himalayas. He's able to provide the citizens with nourishment, with shelter, with wealth, and things like that. He's able to, like the Himalayas does. He's able to provide spiritualists with situations for their learning, like the Himalayas does. Forbearing for what? So here Srila Prabhupada qualifies this other excellent quality of Maharaj Parikshit. Why forbearing? He says, on the surface of the earth, because Maharaj Parikshit is considered forbearing like the earth. Why does he need to be forbearing like the earth? On the surface of the earth, there are so many disturbances caused by the inhabitants. In the modern age, the people have begun to detonate atomic weapons on the surface of the earth. And still the earth is forbearing to its inhabitants, like a mother who excuses a little child. Parents are always tolerant to children for all sorts of mischievous acts. And the child Parikshit is foretold to have these qualities in perfection. And here in the line it says, he'll be forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as his parents. Prabhupada runs these both into the one description. That being forbearing and being tolerant, they're the same sort of thing, aren't they? Forbearing, okay, go ahead, I forgive you. Tolerant, okay, that's all right. You're just a child. And in the purport, these two, it is titikṣur vasudhevāsau, sahiṣṇuḥ, pitarāv. So tolerant like the Himalayas and forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as his parents. It says as tolerant as his parents. Prabhupada says any parents. And if I go over that bit of the purport again, see how Prabhupada combines both of those, which is very interesting. On the surface of the earth, there are so many disturbances caused by the inhabitants. In the modern age, people have begun to detonate atomic weapons on the surface of the earth, and still the earth is forbearing to the inhabitants, like a mother who excuses a little child. Parents are always tolerant to children for all sorts of mischievous acts. An ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities, and the child Parikshit is foretold to have all these qualities in perfection. So it says an ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities. So you can be an ideal king without these good qualities. But Maharaj Parikshit had them all. So he's more than ideal. It's interesting, to be a bona fide spiritual master, you need to have certain qualities. But Srila Prabhupada had all those qualities in full. But it doesn't mean there isn't such thing as an ideal king. Ideal king, without all these qualities. You may not have all these qualities, you can still be an ideal king. It's a very important comment by Srila Prabhupada. He says, an ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities. In other words, there may be some shortcoming in an ideal king. It doesn't mean he's less than ideal. And the child Parikshit is foretold to have all these good qualities in perfection. So why spend 13 verses foretelling what Maharaj Parikshit will be like from the astrologers? And you're also going to tell Maharaj Parikshit's complete life story. Well, a lot of his life story will be described here.
So I take up these verses and predicting it. I remember when the sages were glorifying Maharaj Prithu, saying, you will do this, you will do that. He says, you shouldn't praise people before they've actually done the job. Let me do the job first and then tell me how great I am. Yet here we have 13 verses. Maharaj Parikshit is just scarcely had his umbilical cord cut. And here come all these predictions, like one after another, he will be this, he will be that. You just go through them all. Actually, let's just go through all the predictions. There's too many. There's about 13. I think there's 13 verses. There's too many. There's too many. There's too many to go through. They just come one after another. For instance, the child will be exactly like King Ikshvaku, son of Manu, in maintaining all those who are born. That's a big statement. All those who are born. That's not just a kingdom. And for following the Brahminical principles, especially in being true to his promise, he will be exactly like Rama, the personality of Godhead, the son of Maharaj Dasaratha. And Srila Prabhupada in these, he gives page after page of purport explaining who these people are, why he would be named after them. And in his life, he absolutely showed that. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. And he is the hero. He is the central personality in the greatest scripture ever written. The cream of all Vedic knowledge. Maharaj Parikshit is the central personality around everything, around whom everything rotates. He is the inspiration behind Sukadeva Goswami's enthusiasm to explain and deliver the Srimad Bhagavatam to him in all its form and expand it totally. In the heavenly planet, Srimad Bhagavatam takes up many, many more volumes than we have here. But the Srimad Bhagavatam we have, this is the same Srimad Bhagavatam spoken as Maharaj Parikshit got the information out of Sukadeva Goswami by being so worthy of asking the right questions and listening and touching Sukadeva Goswami's heart with his great devotion to Lord Krishna. He pulled all this information from Sukadeva Goswami, who had heard Srimad Bhagavatam in the womb of his mother. And of course, Sukadeva Goswami is the son of Srila Vasudhā. So here we have the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit being given one by one. Is there any greater personality than Maharaj Parikshit? We are hearing about it now. We've heard he's going to be equal to Ram, almost the same as Lord Krishna. And he's not an avatar. He is just an incredible personality, a wonderful personality. That he will be forbearing, not an ordinary personality, but all the great qualities of the personality of Godhead. So we have these qualities were very well, these qualities that he will be as strong as a lion, as worthy of shelter in the Himālaya Mountains, forbearing like the earth, and as tolerant as the parents. These qualities alone are very important when we consider that Maharaj Parikshit, when he came against Kali, all of these qualities became manifest. He was as strong as a lion in the chase, and the head of state would never fail in chasing an enemy. So Maharaj Parikshit, when he heard about Kali, he went and took him on, and Kali saw that imminent death was coming. So Kali had done terrible things. I've forgotten what in this verse, but Maharaj Parikshit was well aware what Kali was going to do in the future. But because of the rules, Prabhupada describes the rules for a Kshatriya sort of incredibly well. Where did he describe them? And then you can understand why Maharaj Parikshit did what he did better. I think it's in the earlier verses here. You just give me a second while I look for it. I'm not going to be lucky. I should have kept a note of the verse. was more or less that the quality of a kshatriya is that a kshatriya will never honor. Honor is the greatest quality as far as kshatriyas go. One of the greatest qualities. And he will never break his word. It's very powerful. And let me just see, it may have been here. The idea was that even if the king is in a temple, say he's downstairs, and you challenge the king to a fight, he won't say, "Excuse me, I'm in a temple." It doesn't matter where he is. If a kshatriya is challenged, he will always take it up. I just read this earlier on. It was in a very, very nice verse. And I didn't write down the details. But a kshatriya will always rise to a fight. You say, I challenge you to a fight, I want to defeat you. There and then in the temple, the king will be provided with his weapons, and they'll fight. Maybe they'll go outside, I don't know. But there is no time when a kshatriya is challenged when he will say later, you wake him up, I challenge you to death, to a fight to the death. He will immediately get up and fight. He will never refuse a challenge. This is kshatriya. And honor, he will always keep his word. You would think someone so powerful as that will say, I promised you earlier on I wasn't fully serious, I've changed my mind. He will never say that. Prabhupada is describing the kshatriya's nature. And here comes Maharaj Parikshit, he meets Kali. He knows who Kali is. He knows that Kali Yuga is coming. Everybody knows it. They're all aware of it. Even the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, it was the sages at Namashranya, they were concerned. They said, let's do something to help the people. Kali is becoming prominent now. We'll do something to help the people. Maharaj Parikshit knew who Kali was. He knew he would live to the end of the age of Kali. He didn't say, you're predicted to be here. I better not kill you. If I kill you, then that'll be the end of the age of Kali. And that'll be a problem. As soon as he saw Kali, he challenged him to a fight and said, you're up to no good. You're killing this bull, and therefore now I will kill you. There wasn't a second thought. And then Kali, by the prompting, of course, of Super Soul, who's behind everything that happens, he then surrendered to Maharaj Parikshit. And despite having the bull there and the full evidence and the 3 legs all broken, despite seeing that, despite Kali being prepared to do so much damage in the future, because Kali surrendered to him, and Kali, not being an ordinary person, also knew how to surrender. It wasn't a fake surrender. It wasn't sort of, okay, I know how to get out of this trouble. He knew the quality of Maharaj Parikshit, therefore he knew if he surrendered properly, he would be under his protection. So Maharaj Parikshit, being Maharaj Parikshit, and having the quality of the greatest of the ideal king, being, it says here, as good a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. Even a bad person goes to the Himalayas, he can get fruit, he can get shelter, he can get these things. Being as good a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains, Maharaj Parikshit gave him shelter. He came to him for shelter. Okay, I'll give you shelter. But there were conditions. But he gave him shelter. He said, I'll give you shelter. Here's my conditions. And he was forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as parents. Because he was the king, he was prepared to tolerate the bad thing that Maharaj Parikshit, that Kali had done. He was prepared to tolerate that and overlook it. Okay, now I will give you shelter. I overlook what you've done. You're my child. You're in my Hindu. And it's said that he will give shelter to whoever was born. This is the nature of a mother. Whoever's her child. One child is one way, another child is another way. She will give shelter to anyone. Maharaj Parikshit, he will give shelter to everyone who was born. Because I am the king. This is my duty. And so he tolerated Kali, and he was forbearing like the earth. Now you understand what a great predictive verse this is. Now when we hear this, the verse again is, this child will be as strong as a lion. He will be as worthy a shelter as the Himālaya Mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as his parents. And all these qualities became manifest later on in life. And so Srila Prabhupada does actually very nicely describe how astrology is not a... there is a very nice introduction in this that describes how astrology is a proper science. So if I find that verse, I'll be luckier than I was. I'll probably come across the other one that I was looking for. Ooh, so good. The film is so enchanting. No, I'm afraid I can't find that. Can't find that actually example. But Prabhupada was saying in that text how astrology is a perfect science, and just because it's in verse 12. I did write it down. A very nice verse about Vedic astrology. He's describing this. Chapter 12. No, I'm afraid it's not there either. So Srila Prabhupada gives a long description in previous verses of different personalities. And one of the very important things is, why do we accept these stories as true? For instance, there is a story about Maharaj Sibi earlier on. As Srila Prabhupada says, the science of astrology, it actually works, and you can see how specific the astrological science is here, that is picking on Maharaj Parikshit's different points. Each one of these verses describing it. In fact, you had one yesterday that was all about Arjuna, and then there was one about King Sibi the day before. It says, the child will be a munificent donor of charity and protector of the surrendered, like the famous King Sibi of the Ushanara country. And he will expand the name and fame of his family, like Bharat, the son of Maharaj Dushyanta. So, from astrology, here's where accepting that the sages, when Maharaj Parikshit was born, were accepting that they were so expert in judging the stars at the time of his birth that they were actually able to tell that how much charity he would give, that they were able to tell how he would expand the name of his family just from the astrological situation of the stars. And for instance, if we listen to the story about Maharaj Sibi, which is very interesting, just to briefly tell the story, the King of Heaven once took the King of Heaven for a start. The King of Heaven took the shape of a pigeon hunter. Here we've got the King of Heaven, and the King of Heaven is able to take the shape of a pigeon hunter. Agni, the fire god, there is a fire god. He is able to take the shape of a pigeon. The pigeon hunter was an eagle, and he was Indra, the king of heaven. And the pigeon was the fire god, Agni, changed his shape into that of a pigeon. Are you with me? This is not Netflix. The king, the pigeon took shelter of Maharaj Shibi's lap. And the eagle, which was an incarnation of the king of heaven, not an incarnation, which was the king of heaven changed his shape to be an eagle, looked at the pigeon, who was the Agni, the fire god, had changed his shape to be a pigeon, sitting on the lap of Maharaj Shibi, who we can all relate to, who was a king, with arms and legs, a normal king who took his birth. So in this extraordinary situation, the pigeon was there, and the king said, I'll give shelter to the pigeon. Maharaj Shibi, who was a great protector of the surrendered, here's a pigeon on his lap. Along comes the eagle and says, give me my pigeon back. Why did Maharaj Shibi not tell the eagle to go away? Just go away. Because the eagle, he said, I'll give you another something else. I'll give you something else to eat. But the eagle didn't accept. This is very interesting. Maharaj Parikshit could have said, just go, if you won't accept that, I've given you the offer, now go away, leave the pigeon, he's with me. So, but the protector of the surrendered is a problem, because the pigeons on his lap surrendered to him, and the eagle is also coming, please, that's my pigeon. You've got my pigeon. I want my pigeon. I want my lunch back. So Maharaj Parikshit is a protector of the surrendered. He's got to look after both of them. So, but is this an allegory to let us know how we should be generous, or did this actually happen? This is the problem. We can glance over these stories. We've got Maharaj Parikshit. We're getting prediction after prediction after prediction from an astrological science which is so exact, it comes up with names and details and predictions so exactly. It's easy to do that if you do it 5,000 years ago. Presumably this was done 5,045 years ago, because Maharaj Parikshit was at the time of his birth, or whenever the exact date was. So we're looking back. But what sort of... And now it's telling a story. They're predicting something that happened maybe millions of years ago with Maharaj Shibi and a pigeon on his lap. So it's very interesting. This whole Srimad Bhagavatam, it's very interesting. King of heaven, changing his shape to an eagle, changing his shape to Maharaj Shibi. Maharaj Shibi then says, okay, listen, eagle, to satisfy you, will you be satisfied if I give you the pigeon's weight in my own flesh? I hope his wife wasn't beside him at the time, because what husband would say that? A pound of flesh. Okay, what have you got? Look, okay, here you go. Here's a knife. Pigeon on your lap. Eagle there. Eagle arguing, a speaking eagle, arguing with you. Okay, you're the king of the earth with great power, everything. You can't satisfy a simple eagle. And the eagle won't go away. What did he say? This is something else. Okay, scissors. Will I demonstrate? Mataji, we won't allow you to demonstrate a pound of my flesh? Are you sure? What's going to happen when I start cutting myself open? I'm going to die, bleed to death. In fact, it's interesting that this happened, a very famous, you all know the play of Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare, when the Shylock said, I'll lend you the money, but if you don't pay me back, I want a pound of flesh. But the argument was, you can't give a pound of flesh if you drop one drop of blood. The pound of flesh has to be without blood, so therefore the man got out of his thing. But here's Maharaj Shibi having to give, saying, I will cut you a pound of my flesh for the bird, and he does. Goodness knows what his body was like, that he will cut. Where did he cut the pigeon's weight of flesh off? Even then you're wondering, is this an allegory or a true story? And then the pigeon got heavier, and then he would have to cut a bit more. The pigeon then, he realized at one time, the pigeon is just getting heavier and heavier no matter how much flesh I cut off. How much flesh had he cut off by the time the pigeon got so heavy? He realized and then the king of heaven and the Agni Dev, the fire god, gave up their pretense just to test him how great he was at that. So this is a very important point. We've got a little minute. So why are these things true stories? Why do we accept them as true? One time a disciple went to Srila Prabhupada, and he was just taking the part of someone who didn't believe the stories. He was saying, Srila Prabhupada, how do we explain this particular aspect? And Srila Prabhupada said, are you initiated? And he said, yes. Once you're initiated, you're accepting this. Once you accept becoming a devotee, you are accepting these stories, not stories, these as histories. You are accepting them. Every devotee accepts them as true, and we all do. And Srila Prabhupada goes through it. That's the difference between a devotee, and that's the evidence of being a devotee and a non-devotee. We accept these stories, but they are hard to accept, actually, but we accept them. And Srila Prabhupada was unbelievable in that these stories, which in India, in the culture of India, we've got now, you have the Arya Samaj who says these are fables or false stories. You've got different groups of people who say they're moral stories, they're just moral stories, they didn't actually happen. It's okay, they tell the children, okay, I know we've got airplanes and cars, and we've got these books filled with strange stories, and you've got to understand that we're not stupid people who actually believe there's a king of heaven who becomes an eagle, or there's an Agni god who becomes a pigeon. We're actually, these are all stories to tell you moral stories so you can become better people, better scientists. No, actually, the real story, Prabhupada came, and this is very important, Prabhupada came to the home of materialism, and he got people from the New York, from London, from California, to actually accept these stories as true. That is unbelievable. That is the most unbelievable story in the Vedas. The most unbelievable story in the Vedas is not Maharaj, there being a king of heaven in the first place, and that king of heaven who, in the first place, then was able to change his shape into an eagle in the second place. In the third place, there is a king of fire, a god of fire called Agni, who was also able to change his shape into that of a pigeon, and they flew around chasing each other. One fell on the lap, and there was a king there who was so pious that when the eagle spoke to him, he wasn't shocked, and the eagle said, I want the equal weight of your flesh on that pigeon, or I won't let him go. And that was hard to believe. And then the pigeon got heavier and heavier and heavier until the king actually realized something was up, and they revealed themselves to him. That is not as believable as Srila Prabhupada persuading people from the most materialist place in the world to believe them. How about that? That was the biggest miracle. So Srila Prabhupada how he did that was unbelievable, of course. But let's just hear what Srila Prabhupada has to say about that. I know I printed the right one out. The history of Krishna, the person, has been openly seen by everyone. Yet only those who are in love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appreciate this history, whereas non-devotees who have not developed their loving qualities think that the activities, form, and attributes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are fiction. Therefore the verse explains, Nanama rupe guna janma karma bhir nirupitavye tava tasya sahiṣṇuḥ. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given the example that persons suffering from jaundice cannot taste the sweetness of sugar candy, although everyone knows that sugar candy is sweet. Similarly, because of the material disease, Non-devotees cannot understand the transcendental name, form, attributes, and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although they actually see the Lord's activities either through authority or through history. The Puranas are old, authentic histories, but non-devotees cannot understand them, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the essence of Vedic knowledge. Non-devotees cannot understand even the preliminary study of transcendental knowledge, Bhagavad Gita. They simply speculate and present commentaries with absurd distortions. That's what I was saying, like it's a fable or something like that, or surrender to the Krishna within, not the real one. Non-devotees cannot understand them, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the essence of Vedic knowledge. Non-devotees cannot understand even the preliminary study of transcendental knowledge, Bhagavad Gita. They simply speculate and present commentaries with absurd distortions. The King of Heaven, transforming him into an eagle, is not an absurd distortion. The fact that he is there is the truth, and it is an absurd distortion to say it's a fable. Good for Srila Prabhupada. In conclusion, unless one elevates himself to the transcendental platform by practicing bhakti yoga, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his name, form, attributes, or activities. If by chance, by the association of devotees, one can actually understand the Lord and his features, one immediately becomes a liberated person. And Srila Prabhupada goes on. And of course in Srimad Bhagavatam there's a famous verse which says, Kirata Ambira Pulinda Pulkasha, I've got them wrong, Ambira Kashadaya Yene Chapapyanashita Shraya Siddhanti Samai Vishnuvenama. That's simply by the association of the great devotee. All the nations of the world, the Kirats, the Turks, the Germans, everybody can be delivered by his association. And Srila Prabhupada in here he says, if by chance, by the association of devotees, one can actually understand the Lord of his features. And that is the great miracle that Srila Prabhupada did and continues to do through his incredible books. So don't think we're not living in the age of Maharaj Parikshit. Just as when the pigeon landed, just as Maharaj Shibi was having a chit-chat with an eagle, we think that's amazing. In those days, they would think what Srila Prabhupada was amazing. We're living in the land of miracles. When Arjuna would shoot an arrow and it would turn around corners and kill somebody, we think, that's amazing, how does an arrow do that? But actually, that's normal for them. Arrow would shoot his arrow, the other person, they wouldn't all stop. Wow, Arjuna's arrow just turned to 5 corners and then went and just killed one person and not the other person. How did he do that? They weren't thinking that, this is normal. So we're living in a normal mystic world, a mystic world of the 21st century. We take it as normal. But when we hear that Sanjay in his heart was seeing what was happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, we think that's mystic. What do I do with my mobile phone? I can actually see what's happening in London Temple at the moment. Actually, if I go to mayapur.tv, which all the best people do, you can go and find out what's ever. I can actually see it here. I don't have to go and tell it to Maharaj Dhritarashtra. I can say, here, take my phone, have a look. I don't have to relay it to him. We're living in our own mystic age, but we take it as normal. This describes the history of the earth for millions of years, and the technology changes from mantra to yantra to different things. That's all it is. And the Vedas open the door to the past for us, and we can read all these wonderful things and enjoy them. So thank you very much for inspiring me. So wonderful, wonderful audience. Can I just say that it's very late. If anyone's got any burning questions, a burning question at the back, I don't want to keep Padma-pad. I'll get into trouble if I keep going late. My hearing is very bad. So if you tell me, I'll repeat the question. Yeah, okay. But all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I'm not ending the class, but how wonderful Srila Prabhupada did this. It's amazing. If someone's got to go to duties or anything, please feel free. Question? Oh yeah, microphone's coming across. No microphone. My hearing's very bad, so if you could come up closer, that'd be good. Yeah, pretty. Okay.
So, is it necessary to study astrology in order to practice bhakti yoga?
Oh, thank you. The question was, is it necessary to study astrology in order to practice bhakti yoga? I hope not. Is astrology necessary? It's in Varnashram, everything is necessary, and the different parts of the Ayurveda is necessary to keep our good health. We need Ayurveda; it keeps us healthy, and astrology is very helpful to know if somebody's got bad astrological planets. There's ways to actually help them. If someone is practicing devotional service as a devotee, then there's no real need, because we take shelter of Krishna, and so in other words, it's helpful in society for when people in Western people, when they take to Vedic astrology, it does open their minds towards higher things or knowledge from other avenues. So it's handy for preaching, because Vedic astrology gives you a link to devotional service, because it's part of the Vedas. I know even studying languages in college, if you study languages, you learn the Sanskrit is the root of all languages. And it was with that information that Anatoly became Ananta Shaktidas, who founded the whole of the Russian preaching yatra, because Prabhupada used the instruction that used his study in languages to say, yes, Sanskrit is the root of all languages, and he used Sanskrit to bring him to devotional service. So astrology is good. Astrology can bring people to devotional service, because it's a mystic. It comes from the Vedas. We all think it's mystic, and people take an interest in it that way. But for devotees, we're sort of happy with serving Krishna and what Krishna gives, and that's for us. We're happy with that. But it is a good for us to use in preaching, and we always like to do that. So thank you. Hare Krishna. That's good. Yeah.
So it is said that one devotee should be tolerant, and another side he should be enough intelligent or expert to deal with the situations. So whenever
Now, I heard the bit about it's good the devotee should be tolerant, and then you said something else.
and he should be intelligent also to handle situations.
Oh yeah.
So whenever some adverse situation comes, so how would I know that this is the point of my tolerance, or I should use intelligence?
Okay. So Prabhuji said devotees should be tolerant, but we should also be intelligent. So when should we stop being how do we use our intelligence to know the point at which we should stop being tolerant and take some action? That's it. Yeah? Okay. Well, one never stops being tolerant. Even when one does take action, one never stops being tolerant. And I think that when one takes action, one never takes action in that one loses one's intelligence. So, like when we lose our temper in a situation and the situation gets too much for us, then sometimes it goes on too far and we lose our temper, and we take action. But it's not the right way to take action. Action should always be taken. Even when Maharaj Parikshit, he got angry at Kali, or he couldn't threaten to kill him. But he never lost his intelligence. So when Kali surrendered to him, he was immediately, the anger was gone. And he had to deal with him in a different way. But his intelligence wasn't gone, in that he had to give him conditions in which he could stay. So one's never out of, never lost his control. So as a devotee, when the situations get intolerable, when does one decide? I would say a devotee can tolerate any situation for himself, but for other people, one should take action and make sure other devotees aren't in trouble. And I need when does the situation become intolerable? Never. Never. Every situation you get in life is an opportunity to surrender. And that opportunity to surrender may never come again. And Krishna is the observer in the heart of everything. So when one takes an opportunity to surrender to Krishna, then what one has hankering to do, that the situation is stopping one doing, Krishna will provide that many, many times over in the future. But one must always try to surrender to Krishna in every situation. And but if there is one situation when one is subjected to physical harm, then where there's physical harm or injury, then one has to look after one's health in order to be able to serve Krishna. So that is important. I would think one has to always look after one's health. But if it's especially, the reason one sometimes feels things are intolerant is when there is when one feels mentally distressed. Usually it's that. So if we're dealing with mental distress and things like that, that sort of is a very good opportunity to surrender. Because if it's mental distress, I feel I'm not being appreciated, I can't get to do what I want, and things like that, then one needs to be able to, one can take that as an opportunity for surrender. I would say that. I'm not quite right, because I'm sure there's specific cases where one should do something, but from my own personal experience, I would say that as one grows older, one grows more tolerant, and looking back, one sees when one wasn't tolerant, one sees them as mistakes. And so I would say that it's always, within devotional service and within your service, everything difficulty you get is a great, great opportunity. And if you don't deal with it now, you'll have to keep dealing with it until you actually get over it. And once you do deal with it, everything raises up a level. So that's what we all want. So people are lucky, as Krishna said to Arjuna, you're not wanting to fight. Any kshetra is happy for this opportunity, because by doing this, they get the goal, the higher plans. And for devotees, we want to make spiritual progress. So every time we get some difficulty or problem, that is actually what we're looking for, because it highlights what's wrong with us. And you'll see other people in the same situation, not a problem. So this is our chance. And everybody's got different things they come up with. So I'd say if it's just a situation like that, we should embrace them and be happy that they're coming. It's good. So I think the cleaners are going to come in. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble with Padmapad Prabhu, and you know how angry he gets. Yeah? My life won't be worth living. So, but it'll give me an opportunity to tolerate, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.